State borders embody cleavages in a community. It is these basic lines and the opposition to align them which pave the way to relatively homogeneous us. The territory of the social political system takes shape during the mapping of outer cleavages. The limits are either protected or somehow marked out. That's why Max Weber saw a political system as an organized hierarchy aimed at maintaining order on a specific territory with a threat or use of physical force. Norwegian political scientist Stein Rokkan described one of the most famous cleavages in history. He came up with the idea of the city belt in Europe, the strip from Birmingham to Florence, also known as the blue banana zone in economic geography. The blue banana concept was developed by French geographer Roger Brunet. It describes a discontinuous corridor of urbanization spreading over Western Europe with a population exceeding 100 million. It is Europe's economic core. The theories of Rokkan and Brunet taken together show that the economic and demographic frameworks of modern Europe coincide with the ancient borders of the Roman Empire and German barbarism. How did it happen, and was it coincidental? The matter is that cleavages are not only barriers. They are also zones of communication and mutual enrichment of neighboring states. The location facilitates cultural interaction. It allows borrowing the best norms and practices from neighbors. Moreover, the super intense competition for this space between neighboring states gives the local elite opportunity to walk a tightrope between the external players, exit strategies to borrow the Rokkan's terminology. It also creates unique opportunities for social, cultural, and economic innovations. Apart from external cleavages, there exist internal ones. Sometimes the latter evolve into the former. Take the Catholic-Protestant divide in the Netherlands, which led to the secession of Belgium. Rokkan and Lipset classified the following oppositional pairs as the key type of cleavages: national center and ethnic cultural peripheries, secular and church authority, industrial city and agriculture village, landowners and employees. Such cleavages often coincide with ideological and political basic lines and sometimes with the structure of the state party system. State borders go by land, sea, air, and under the surface. The land territory of a state is the whole area within state borders. It's measured to gather the official data on the state size and the length of its borders. The land territory includes islands and exclaves, as well as artificial territories acquired through accretion. The sovereign maritime space comprises internal, archipelagic, and territorial waters. Territorial waters are waters adjacent to the land territory, internal and archipelagic waters, with the breadth not exceeding 12 miles from the baseline. The definition also applies to all islands of the state. The state's sovereign territory includes airspace over land and internal, archipelagic, and territorial waters. Vertically, airspace starts at 0 mark above the terrain or water surface and ends at the lower boundary of outer space. Since space facilities belong to international space, artificial satellites must orbit the Earth outside airspace. The state exercises sovereignty also under the land territory and territorial waters, which is vertically limited by the technical accessible depth. The state does not enjoy sovereignty over the territories outside its territorial sea. However, it is entitled to try and lay down its own rules in certain issues related to mixed-status territories. In the marine area, these include contingent zone, exclusive economic zone, and the extended continental shelf. The contiguous zone is a tribute to history. In the 19th century, ships entering the 3-mile zone of the state territorial waters were stopped for primary control. The state does not exercise sovereignty over the area, but it is entitled to establish the necessary control to prevent the violation of customs, fiscal, immigration, and sanitary rules, stop, board, and inspect the ship, carry out the investigation into the violation, and administer punishment, in particular for forbidding entry into the territorial sea. The exclusive economic zone is the territory with mixed regime located between territorial sea and the high seas, up to the 200 miles from the baseline. Exclusive economic zones take up a significant part of the world ocean. Their emergence is attributed to the position of developing states, which rightly believe that open competition for ocean resources would always bring advantages to countries with large advanced fishing fleets, which would only increase the economic disparity. The continental shelf is the submerged prolongation of the continent, which is part of the sovereign territory within the country's territorial sea, and the territory with a mixed regime when it extends beyond it, up to 350 miles from the baseline. Extraterritoriality is the status implied to a physical space which is situated beyond the territorial boundaries of a sovereign state, but which is subject to its jurisdiction while enjoying the immunities from local laws. Extraterritorialities include, for example, diplomatic missions, military bases and facilities abroad, vessels and aircrafts, state-owned facilities in space and on celestial bodies, research stations in Antarctica, and many other objects. State borders are traditionally categorized in accordance with the physiographic principle, the origin and functions. The physiographic principle takes into account the main natural boundary, which led to the emergence of the state border in that particular place. As interstate relations developed, the borders came ever closer to natural barriers as they were cheaper to equip and easier to patrol. The Pyrenees mountain chain, forming a natural border between Spain and France, is one of the longest-lasting stable borders in the world. This principle allows dividing borders into the following types. Geometric boundaries run along a straight line. For example, borders between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia near the Gulf of Aqaba. Astronomical boundaries run along parallels or meridians, like US-Canada border or South Africa-Namibia border. Orographic boundaries run along a watershed, which often coincides with mountain ranges. The Russian-Georgia border along the Caucasus Mountains. Hydrographic boundaries run along rivers and lakes, like the Russian-China border along the Amur River and the Russian-Kazakhstan-Azerbaijan border along the Caspian Sea. Contour boundaries run along the boundaries of geographic areas, deserts, forests, and others. For example, the Russia-Belarus border. Maritime boundaries run along the borders of the state's territorial waters, like the Iran-Amman border in the Strait of Hormuz. The same types can be found at the regional level as well. For instance, the astronomical principle is applied to the borders between many states in the USA and between the Nenets Autonomous Okrug and the Komi Republic in Russia. The genetic classification takes into account the origin of borders and divides them into the following types. Antecedent boundaries are drawn from intensive settlement, like the USA and Canada, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Subsequent boundaries are drawn after intensive settlement and take into account ethnic and cultural areas. Borders in the most European states are the examples. Superimposed boundaries are also drawn after intensive settlement, but they ignore ethnic and cultural patterns, like colonial borders in Africa and the Middle East. Relict boundaries are former state borders that continue to function as internal cleavages. South and North Vietnam, West Germany, and East Germany boundaries are the examples. The functional classification divides the borders into the following types. Separating boundaries alienate states and impede interaction between their citizens, like North and South Korea border, Russia and post-Maidan Ukraine border. Filtering boundaries regulate the flows of people, goods, information and values from the bordering states, like the border between the Russia and the EU countries. Contact boundaries allow the integration of states and create conditions for enhanced cooperation between their citizens, like the boundaries within the European Union. Boundary making undergoes three stages. First, the stage of delimitation, meaning legal formation of the state boundary, whose position is graphically plotted on the topographic map. Second, the stage of demarcation, meaning marking out the course of the state boundary on the ground by means of state boundary markers. Third, the stage of remarking, meaning regular revision of the boundary following physiographic changes. The demarcation starts at the state boundary strip, which is cleared from vegetation and other objects within the several meters from the future border. Then the pillars are erected along the boundary, and according to established rules, neighboring countries place their special boundary markers 2.5 meters away from these pillars. With this, the border is seen as being legally possessed.